going on, everybody? Welcome to the Always Hope Podcast, a production of Willwood's Faith and Marriage. This is Dr. Mario Sacasa, and I pray that you're having a great day today. All right, well, joining me on the show today is Elizabeth Busby, Director of Programs at the Theology of the Body Institute and creator of the program Next Step, and also host of the Discerning Marriage Podcast. Elizabeth's got a lot going on in her life, which is awesome. Elizabeth joins me on the show where we tackle questions that we got from her followers on Instagram, asked some questions about dating, and we got some great questions. So we answered some of those questions on her podcast, and we tackled some of them on mine. And so the questions that we tackle on this one is what to do if I'm a woman who's not getting asked out on dates. How do you know if you're doing the will of God when dating online? How can I be more like the Blessed Virgin Mary while I'm in a relationship? How to communicate with one another when communication styles are different. If any of those questions seem of interest to you, then you're going to love this episode. Now, I do have to forewarn you, you need to hang tight just a little bit because this episode we go off the rails quite a bit. We have a great conversation, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. So if you find this show helpful, please leave a rating or write a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Share it on the socials or simply just tell somebody about it. We love being able to hear what our listeners are saying and love people like you who are sharing, and spreading the word about the good work we're doing with the Always Hope Podcast. So let's get into this conversation with Elizabeth Busby. Elizabeth Busby, welcome to the Always Hope Podcast. How are you?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm overjoyed to be here.
Oh, well, the pleasure is all mine. So we're collaborating a little bit here. I was on your podcast a little bit ago. We did a wonderful interview on that. And then I cleaned up my studio setup now that I'm in Charlotte. And now I have you on my podcast. And I think everything looks a little better from your side. Is that right?
It does. You look great. Your setup is awesome. Your camera's awesome. Cozy chair is awesome. You just look great. I think it's awesome. At
some point, I keep teasing that this will become a video podcast at some point, and maybe it will
I forgot
happen.
they can't see it. You guys,
they can't see it.
Out.
Well, you can give a description.
Full.
Give a description of what
He
it
has these
looks
3
like.
bookshelves. They're so full, but artfully so. Did you do that, or did your wife do that with the picture book combo?
No, that's me.
Did you do? That's
me.
you.
That's
well
me.
done. I love that. I love when men have good design taste. That's awesome.
Soy Latino, I'm Hispanic.
This is why Mary loves you guys the best.
It comes out.
Just kidding.
I dress myself, and I design my own office studios here.
Well, you can come design my office studios because I do not have that gift of design. So that would be great. That's our next collaboration. You can
Sounds great.
My bookshelves look as good as your bookshelves look.
Yeah, this is it's all posturing back here. It just makes me look smart. That's all it is.
Effective.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the podcast and joining me. Introduce yourself to the audience. I know you got a lot going on, but tell people who you are and what you got going on for those who don't know you.
Sure. So I am Elizabeth Busby. I am a passionate lover of Jesus Christ. He
Yay.
is my everything, and everything that I have to say means nothing unless I identify myself first as a beloved daughter. So,
Amen.
Thank you, Lord, for all of the gifts and all of the graces you've given me in my life so that everything I'm about to say is true. I am married to the most incredible man I know. I still, every day, we've been married for almost 7 years. So I don't know when this is dropping. Our anniversary is October 24th.
Oh, wonderful. Mine's the 19th.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh, October's the best.
Yes, it is.
I love Anne of Green Gables, and she has that quote, "I'm so happy to live in a world where there are Octobers."
Oh, wow.
And I knew I had to pull my own sliver of October. So I was adamant we get married in October. And he was like, okay.
So did we. Those are one of the many books that I was supposed to read in high school that I didn't.
And you didn't yet?
I didn't.
And you only have boys. Okay. You're going to have to read them. You need to read them.
But I don't. But I only have boys. Isn't that?
I know.
I always thought it was kind of like isn't it like a girl? Like girls like those books, right? Am I being? I'm
Girls
not trying to be
do
sexist.
like those books, but they're still. I mean, you're married to a girl.
I am married to a girl.
You're probably going to have some granddaughters.
Maybe at some point. Then I'll read Anne of Green Gables.
I know. Oh, love her though. She is great. She's really great for 9 to 11-year-old girls. So I get that you haven't had many of those in your life, but yeah, I was one, and I love her, and I love October.
Praise God.
Anyway, I feel like this. We're just going to be chatting.
We're already off the rails. It's all good.
I don't know, how did this even happen? Okay, I love to read, obviously. My husband is fantastic. Seriously, multiple times a week, I'm like, how did I get so lucky? How did he choose me? He's so good. And we have 3 gorgeous children: Caroline with a K, and Clara Zelli, and we are expecting
Oh,
to
congratulations.
in March.
Awesome.
Thank you. I can't even believe it. It's so excited.
So great.
Living our dream. I have a master's in theology, and I wrote my thesis on how theology of the body can help people discern marriage. And I turned that thesis into my Next Step program, which I'm pumped to talk to you about. I also have a master's in marriage counseling. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And this is actually where Dr. Mario and I met for the first time at a Catholic Psychotherapy Association conference in 2016. He does not remember me, and I remember him. And that is a perfect, that's
embarrassing.
Yes. He was
I'm sorry.
farther along in his career. He was, hey, please don't apologize. You met 50 million people that day. You also, I think, were doing something at the conference. Like you had like a booth or like a talk, or
I think I was the MC that conference.
Well, there you go.
I think I was MCing that conference. Yeah. I think that's what was happening. Yeah.
Yep. And I have remembered you this entire time. So you made a great impression. I love good Catholic therapists.
Praise God.
They're wonderful. So anyway, and my husband and I recently moved from Texas to Pennsylvania to follow my dream of working with the Theology of the Body Institute. So now we share a job as the director of programs so that one of us can be at work and one of us can be raising our kiddos. And I can't even believe it's my real life.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Give God your dreams, y'all. Give God your dreams. He will give you more than you could have ever even imagined.
Yeah, it's true. And it sometimes it takes time. So, I mean, I'm here in Charlotte, and this was a dream of ours to get back to North Carolina after 15 years. I got my master's in counseling. I've shared this on the show already, so people are probably sick of it. They're like, all right, stop talking about it, Mario. But like, but I just say every day I pinch myself. I'm like, I'm really in North Carolina. Like it's fall. There's fall. There's a fall. For those of us who live in the South, like Louisiana, Florida, we don't know Texas. There's no fall. There's no fall. There's a real fall here. Like October. We love October. We honeymooned in the mountains in October because that's where we got married.
Beautiful.
And we're just a little bit ahead of you. We celebrate 20 years on the 19th.
A little bit. You are living it. I love that so much.
That's crazy to say that. That's
huge.
Crazy. Thanks, Elizabeth. It's really nuts. So it happens. And everybody says it. And I know everybody's already told you, blink of an eye, time flies. And it just does. It's just what it is. But you just appreciate and enjoy every moment. And you just give it to the Lord. And he provides, certainly.
Amen.
So good that you guys are pursuing the dream, living the life, helping out the good people at the Theology of the Body Institute and doing good work up there. So we collaborated on, it's kind of a circular. It's funny because the way we got connected, and I don't know why the audience needs to know this, but let's just, for the sake of it, let's be chatty. Why not? Let's get chatty today. Let's just do it. I connected with, so Father Josh, this is the podcast world. So I was on Father Josh's podcast promoting Dating Well. And one of the campus ministers at, I think your alma mater, right? Texas A&M, at St. Mary's, the campus ministry there, listened to that episode, reached out to me. I gave him access to the program. He enjoyed it. He loved it. But he also said, but we also do this other program called Next Step by Elizabeth Busby. And I was like, oh, who's Elizabeth busby? And he said, oh, well, you should look into her program. You should reach out to her. And I was like, that's great. So that's how I reached out to you. So it's like there's like a podcast, like community that's like out there that's just weird, that's like conversations happening that we don't even know about. So that's how I reached out to you, and I said, hey, let's do an episode, let's do kind of a joint episode. And you were like, yeah, let's do it, this is great. And then you told me that you had already met me in 2016. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I do remember. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'd be lying if I said that I did. Which makes me sound super important, and I am not. That's the problem.
You have been in my mind, though, for these like 6 years or 7 years. So I'm like geeking out over here. This is the second time that someone that I know of who's like famous that I've like would have loved to reach out to. Because Kevin, thanks, Kevin, by the way,
thanks,
for
Kevin.
the connection.
Yeah, Kevin, you get a shout out.
Heyo, we went to school together, and now we're both living our dreams. Like he's at our alma mater and I'm at the TOB Institute. And it's so cool to like watch how the Lord has moved in our lives after like all these years. And also Father Josh was on my TOB1 when I went as a student in 2014. Wow. So there is no way he remembers me, but I remember him. He made a huge impact on me. So maybe you can connect me with Father Josh. I would love to be connected with Father Josh. He has like some like online collaboration with Sister Josephine Garrett, who I knew through a Theology of the Body ministry back in like 2011, before she was even Sister Josephine. I don't know if she calls her old name publicly, so I won't, but before she was even Sister Josephine. Anyways, so I've seen Father Josh work with Sister Josephine, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's like the communion of saints. Like the Lord gives us a taste, like he makes saints in batches, and all of us get to like be doing this work together.
Amen.
Collaborating, Anyways, so
well, I know Father Josh listens to the show, so I'm sure he'll hear
Father
it.
Josh, do you want to come on my podcast? Is this a lame way to make this happen?
And Sister Josephine, I've had her on my show also, so maybe she's
Sister Josephine will probably remember me. I don't know. I don't know. I hope I made a good impression on Sister Josephine. I hope she would remember me, but I was also like 22 and very loud, and who knows. Anyways,
all good. All good things.
So this is the second time that someone who's famous has reached out to me that like was on my idea list, because Kevin had sent me "You're dating well," and I was like, yes, whenever I have my stuff together, I want to get Dr. Mario on.
Yeah.
This is the second time it's happened that one of y'all reached out to me first, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jesus, you were so generous to me. Gotta be cool.
Lord.
Everyone be cool. It's just a normal day. Yes, I would love to come on your podcast, Dr. Mario. That sounds perfectly normal.
It's hilarious. It's so funny. It's just strange. It's all strange. The whole thing's strange. So, but I'm grateful. Okay. So that's the backstory. Not that you wanted to know, listener, but there it is.
Maybe they do. Maybe they want to be friends with us too.
Hey,
now they're going to feel like they're friends with us.
They are. Absolutely. Hit us up on social media. Direct message us. DM us. See, I'm so old. I said direct message. You see how old I am? I'm like, it's just DM. Use what's supposed to be done.
I was going to let you have it.
Whatever.
I said FOMO the other day, and my boss was like, what's that? I was like, oh.
Really?
He did.
That's
and
funny.
he has teenage kids. I don't know how he didn't know that.
Yeah, how do you not know that? That's
so
strange.
Funny.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what are we doing on the show besides just going to shoot?
Hey, this is your show. You told me I could just relax and be myself.
This is my show, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I love it. I absolut's love it.
I'm along for the ride, Dr. Mario. You tell me what you want to do.
Hey, I'm only drinking water right now. Okay, we could change this party. It's a little early. I'm not in Louisiana anymore, so I'm not allowed to drink in the morning.
That's so fun.
So a couple of weeks ago, we had this idea. Let's do the show. We're like, oh, this is great. And then I was like, well, how about we just do kind of a collaboration where we ask questions to our followers and get some questions about dating. Let's tackle those questions, and then we'll be able to answer them. So we had a number of questions that you beautifully put out. You asked, solicited, and your followers did a wonderful job asking. We tackled some of those questions already on your podcast, the Discerning Marriage Podcast, which is also on YouTube. If people are interested, please go ahead and check that out. That's really the first part of this conversation. And then now we're tackling kind of some of the questions that we didn't have enough time to be able to do on your show. So we're going to do that now. Sound good?
Sounds awesome. I'm pumped.
All right. So I'm going to let you get started here because I think this is a great question here to start with. So it says, what should you do as a woman if you rarely get asked out on a date?
See, this question it so stirs my heart. I have such deep sympathy for the women who are asking this sort of question, because what I hear underneath it is, I really feel called to marriage, or I at least want to try pursuing being called to marriage. I respect the masculine genius of like the man wanting to pursue, and I want to support him in pursuing. And I want to be mindful of not like almost emasculating him by asking. Now, I don't agree that not asking on a date is emasculating, but I do think that there are some people with the intention of not emasculating. They would rather not enter into it. And then this feeling of like, I have to just wait around, and maybe I'm wasting my time. So that's what I read into all of that, of like, I just have deep sympathy for the people who are asking this question, because it's a really painful place to be. And obviously I'm a woman, so I don't have the experience of being a man and being able to be the one to like kind of make things happen, if you will, or like initiate in the dating world. So I would love your opinion as a man about like what you hear about this question. But as a woman, the first thing that I would say is, this is a typical answer and people are probably gonna be like, oh, but stick with me. Okay, listen, the first thing that I think you should do is increase your prayer life, because it is so easy to buy into lies about your own identity, about your worth, about the whole, like being single is a waiting room. Like it's so easy to buy into those lies, right? Whether those lies come from your own woundedness, whether those lies are spiritual temptations away from trust in the Lord, whatever they are, it is so easy to buy into them. And I think that discerning marriage, discerning any vocation really, but discerning marriage and, sometimes even as a woman, it's a really vulnerable place to be. And I think that you can be really open to a lot of these kind of negative thoughts, negative thought patterns, negative spiritual attacks, maybe if we want to go that far. And so I think that you need to take this to the Lord in prayer. And I don't remember if I said this with you. I know I've said it on my show before, so I want to say it again. Pope Benedict, who I love, Pope Emeritus Benedict, wrote this beautiful thing on prayer in one of the books that he wrote. And he said, the church fathers say that prayer, properly understood, is nothing other than becoming a longing for God. Mm-hmm. And we think of prayer so often as we think of prayer like we thought of it when we were children, like learn your prayers and kneel by your bed at the end of the night and bless my mom and bless my dad and bless my grandmother and bless my blah, blah, blah. And I want this and please give me that. And I'm sorry for this. And, we think of prayer like that sometimes even as adults, but that's not what the Lord wants for us. Once we get to a certain level of spiritual maturity, like he wants our heart and he wants a relationship with us. And I feel like there are certain times in your life where you are more in touch with that longing. And discerning marriage is one of them. And I feel like this woman is in touch with her longing on some level. She wants to be pursued and she wants to be discerning marriage with someone. And that is a perfect place to encounter the Lord and to have real, authentic, good, beautiful prayer of becoming this longing for God and pressing into that longing for a spouse and a longing to be seen and a longing to be chosen, but knowing that you are seen and known and loved by God and by Christ. And when you have that grounding, I think that there's a potential for a lot more peace in this season of waiting. I also don't want you to be like overly pious in your pursuit of that prayer. Like be honest with him. Like journaling, I find can be very helpful in these seasons where you're just trying to get your thoughts out. So I would encourage that. And then from a practical perspective, I would honestly look at how much are you exposing yourself to other people? So do you go out? Right? Like, do you have friends that you go out with? Do you go, like, if you're going to mass maybe, or maybe you're volunteering with a youth group and they all go out after, like a group of people, like, let's go out and get some drinks or let's go out and get some coffee. Do you go? Or do you just go home? Is your work really busy? And so you don't have time to meet the kind of people you'd want to be dating, do we need some adjustment in the way you're spending your time? Are you around the kind of people that you want to be going on dates with? So, are you surrounding yourself with the sort of people that you would want to say yes to that are in this posture also of intentional dating, right? Because if you're very, very wrapped up in the culture, well, maybe they don't want to be asking on dates in the culture. Are you open to online dating? And if so, are you being mindful and intentional about the way you're using your profile and the way that you're interacting on there? Whatever it is, it's important to put yourself out there so that you can meet people. And I also, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Dr. Mario, but I also think that it would be okay if you made your intentions clear. If there was a man in particular that you're thinking about and you could be like, hey, I'd be interested in going on a date with you if that's something that you want, but if you ask on a date, you have to pay. I feel very
for the girl also. You feel
yes,
that?
I think. Yeah, I think it would be so rude for her to be like, go on a date with me and then expect him to pay for her.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I just have
that's
to
true.
say,
that's true.
Like, if you're gonna ask someone on a date, or if you're gonna initiate that discussion, be prepared to pay for it.
Be prepared.
That's how I
like
feel.
That. I like that. No, I like everything you're saying. So recapping just the prayer aspect of it, I think it's absolutely right. That I agree. I don't know if we talked about this on your show already, but my heart always goes out to individuals who. I mean, I equate it very much to like infertility with couples, that there's something that you're longing for, that you really want an answer for, that you've been praying and it just hasn't come. And that doesn't mean that you're bad. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that, there might just be a wasp in your room. I'm sorry, I just got distracted by looking at you doing that. So let it
Yeah, I would have to check on the status.
Just letting everybody know that Elizabeth, pray for Elizabeth right now, and that she doesn't get stung by this wasp. Like, it's in the room. It's totally.
St. Francis is protecting me from it, but I just had to check to see if it was still there.
Let's get a hedge of protection over you, to protect this wasp. It doesn't come down. We need
fine for now. It's just listening to our show.
Yeah. A cloud of fog. What is it, like bug fog? That's what we're praying for, spiritual bug fog, Lord, that it may repel the bugs. Yeah, I do too. So, what were we saying? Prayer. We were talking about prayer. We're talking about
which I was doing, which we're doing now to protect me from the wasp.
That's right. Is there a special prayer to not get hit by a wasp? Like,
I think St. Francis.
Yeah, St. Francis. Yeah.
He'll protect me.
He'll protect you. Absolutely. So talking about prayer. Okay. So I think it's right in terms of just, obviously the Lord wants that. And I think so beautifully, talking about Pope Benedict and how the Lord desires our desires and desires us to be in relationship with him. And so sometimes that longing, what it does is it purifies us, and it purifies those desires, because not every desire that we have is from God. And so it does take time for us to be able to purify and sift through our own hearts to understand, well, what genuinely is of the Lord, and what maybe needs to be massaged in a new way. What do I have too many expectations? Do I have too high of expectations on certain people or on what dating is supposed to look like? I'm not saying that's the case with this woman who's asking this question. I'm just saying in general that these are opportunities for us to be able to massage and to sift through what those expectations are that we have as the Lord is working within us, because the Lord certainly gives us a brain and wants us to be intentional in thinking and knowing about our own hearts, what our checklist is, what's the type of person that we're attracted to. Absolutely. But God also likes to surprise us and can bring us people that we're like, oh, okay, all right, I didn't even think about that. I never even considered somebody, like, okay, all right, Lord, let's see what we got, and it's okay to have a little bit of that openness to seeing where the Lord is leading you. But everything else you said, I fundamentally agree with in terms of just getting out, putting yourself out a little bit more, putting yourself in circles where you can be found, putting yourself in communities where there's good people, knowing how to state your intentions, maybe also knowing how to, I know flirting can get kind of a bad rap sometimes, but there's something to it, in terms of being able to.
Absolutely. 100%.
Thank you. All right. That flirting doesn't always mean that it's like going to lead to the bedroom, which is unfortunately what it's become, or it's always, sexual innuendos. I'm not saying that, of course, at all. But in terms of being able to like carry a conversation and be pleasant and, know how to do those things. And if you feel that you may be lacking that, then, there's plenty of resources online, to help you with that. So
I think flirting does a good job of distinguishing between types of relationships. Like it helps clarify your intention without having to explicitly clarify your intention.
Yes. So do you think that, again, we don't know this person's circumstances, but do you think that it could be, again, hypothetical, we don't know this, but it could be that maybe not knowing how to state those intentions or open up a little bit with those intentions, whether directly you said, or kind of more, I shouldn't say passively, but indirectly, through kind of flirting. You think that could be a skill here that could help just kind of broadcast a little bit. You gotta have the antenna on, you gotta have the radar on. It's the signal's gotta be pinging, you know what I mean? Like that something's available, and not that you're broadcasting that to everybody. Obviously that's a vulnerable state, but maybe there's certain people that you're beaming, beamforming.
Yes. No, I totally think you're right. And maybe you're not getting asked on dates because people think you're not interested in them.
Well, that's
and
it.
Flirting is truly one of those ways that you communicate that. And, in a silly way,
exactly.
extra smiley way.
Yes,
and I'm giving you more attention than the other people if we all go out to coffee kind of way, not in a and I'm in your lap all of a sudden. That's not what we mean.
Exactly.
But we just mean being extra friendly and Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Don't you cover this in Dating Well? I feel like you
do.
talk about this in Dating Well.
I do a little
bit. Listen, she just needs to watch it. You did not intend for me to go there, but I went there.
I appreciate
now there's
that.
a resource that I can give people, and I'm not going to be shy about it.
I do, but I was happy to hear. I mean, I want to hear women to talk about it. So the other question I really have, and I want you to follow up on this. What do you think about girls asking guys out? I mean, that's not one of the questions here, but just in general, where do we stand on that? What's your thoughts in 2022 about
I
that?
think that it's okay for the first date. I think after that, making your intentions known, like I would be open to a second date, but not asking on the second date. That's where I would say the line would be. But I think that we live in a culture that has so devalued masculinity that men don't have the courage to pursue anymore. And I think that we have over time as a culture just completely robbed men of the confidence. They're not taught the confidence. They're not encouraged in the confidence. Like I know that there are women who perhaps with the best of intentions or maybe out of their brokenness that they're not aware of will if a man holds the door for them, they'll say something sassy and not walk through it, those sorts of things. Right. And if that hasn't happened to you, you probably heard a story about it, or maybe this is the first you've heard. So sorry, but it happens. And so I think just as a culture, well, there you go. So I think just as a culture, we have taught men that we don't want them to pursue. And so when you're in a place where you're, rediscovering authentic femininity and authentic masculinity and that beautiful complementarity of the sexes, that you may find yourself in a situation where there aren't men who have that confidence, and a woman going out of her way to communicate that she is interested may be what the man needs. But I also think that there's a certain point at which he can take over, because I do think that it's important for his confidence. Like, men want to pursue and women want to be pursued. Like, I read the Eldridge books, Wild at Heart and Captivating forever ago. And it was so formative for me. Like, oh, hey, look at that.
So is that earlier book that you talked about, The School of Prayer. It's on the shelf too.
Excellent. I love that you plucked the title. I've forgotten the title, and there it is.
It's right there. I can pull it out.
Excellent. I love him so much. He's such a good father. Pope Benedict, that is. Anyways, so I think that it's okay for women to ask men on first dates. I think after that, there needs to be an evaluation, like of why you would be pursuing or why he wouldn't be open to be pursuing, because you've clearly communicated that you're interested. And that you'll go. So giving him that courage and giving him that bump is good. But if you ask on the date, you have to pay. Yeah. I feel very strongly about that. So
I like
if you don't want to pay,
I like that. Then don't ask.
Don't ask.
Don't ask. But if you are, I don't even know how. I feel weird I've been so far out of this. I'd feel weird if I didn't pay for the first date. But I agree with what you're saying, that if you're being asked out, then that the onus is on you. Take responsibility for that.
Well, once you go on the date, if he decides he wants to pay, don't like push and shove and have a credit card battle over it.
Yeah.
But you should be ready to pay. You should be ready
to pay.
Because I don't
that.
think that it's polite. I don't think it's good manners.
No, that's like my mom telling me as a kid, like, don't invite yourself over to somebody else's house for dinner.
Exactly.
Like my mom, that was a very clear rule in the house.
I love that. Yeah, we had some of those clear rules too, and they were good.
No, this is
time, but they were good.
But they were true. Yeah, exactly. They were very good. Yeah, thanks. Words to live by. Thanks, Mom. We appreciate it. It translates.
Love it.
So, but I want to dive a little bit deeper on this before we move on to the next question, because you're absolutely right in terms of the challenge it is for men to initiate, and I think that even in our culture, again, the Me Too movement and the whole conversation about toxic masculinity a couple years ago was absolutely needed, and I think that the women who shared their stories and came out with their experiences were obviously horrific, and those things needed to be shared publicly. I think the unintentional consequence that may have happened, though, is that now men don't feel like, they just don't know where we stand on anything. And so like, you almost need to ask permission to even ask somebody out on a date. So I was like, do I need to have your permission before I can even ask you out for a date? So there's like consent. Do I need to have consent before I can even, there's so many structures on this now that have created these hiccups that I find are very difficult to navigate, and very difficult to be able to say, well, how do I really come forward and say my intentions, or say that I'm interested? And I think there's ways that we can do this that isn't creepy. We don't want guys to be creepy, of course. Like, that's just not, nobody likes that. Or overly, sexually advanced. We don't want that either. But there is ways that you can at least go up and talk to us. Now I'm switching this to the guys, because for the guys who struggle asking girls out. Not that this is a question, but we're just piggybacking on the other side of this first question.
It could also be the flip side of it. Like,
it could be the other side. Maybe she's not getting asked because men aren't asking. And when I've done lectures on college campuses, and I ask this question often, about like, how many women, feel that they're not being asked enough? A lot of women raise their hands. We'll say, well, how do you feel when you get asked out? And almost always the answer that I get is, even if I'm not necessarily interested in the guy, I'm always appreciative that somebody's taken the time to ask me out. I'm appreciative, and I understand the courage that it takes for somebody to come approach me and to come and talk to me. And I'm grateful for that. And now that might not be every woman, but at least like the ones that I've gotten the responses from, and I see you're shaking your head right now, so you're kind of in agreement with this, is that like, that's the permission, gentlemen, is that like, have a little bit of courage, ask her out, make it clear. That's the other piece, is because we don't know if we have to consent before we don't even know what to call it. And so it's like, well, let's just kind of hang out a little bit. And like, hanging out, I think, is probably the worst word that's like the most ambiguous word.
Preach.
Because
so confusing.
It's so confusing. And this needs to be said, gentlemen, if you're going to ask her out, you need to, like, it's a date, and say, hey, I want to go out. Like, let's go out on a date, or however you want to phrase that, but making it clear that it is a date and not just hanging out. Use the word date. There it is. There's from Elizabeth. You just say it. Use the word date. Let's go on a date. Because that clears things up. And the reason that clarity is important and why that's also a gift for her is because she's going to dress differently if it's just a hangout or if it's a date. And if
Well said.
and she's going to obsess about, and if it is just a hangout, not knowing, she's going to call her friends and trying to figure out, what does he really mean? What are we doing? Do I kind of go in the middle between just kind of hanging out clothes or kind of date clothes? Do I play kind of halfway in between? Do I go a little bit more on the fancy side or do I not? Like, these are all real conversations that you can spare her by just making it clear what it is.
I love this. You don't even have daughters. This must have come from your clinical expertise here, because
I have sisters, and it comes from my clinical expertise. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, my sisters taught me well too. Also,
they did.
All right.
Thank you, sisters.
Anything else you want to add to that before we move on?
That's it. I think it's thorough. I love it.
Next question: how do you know whether you are doing God's will while online dating? How do you know if you're doing the will of God while you're dating online?
How do you know whether you're doing God's will when you're dating? Period.
I don't know.
I think that I think that we've reached a point in our culture where we don't really need to make a huge distinction between online dating and dating.
Correct.
I think if we make a distinction between online dating and dating, it gets kind of emotionally dangerous territory almost, because you run the risk of having a really intense emotional, maybe even spiritual relationship before you've ever even met. And I think that can be kind of risky. And so like, I like to think of online dating as like, this is the tool you're using to connect with the person, but make it incarnational as soon as you possibly can. Right. So talk on the phone, do, FaceTimes, get in person if you can. One of you fly to meet the other one. Like, I almost feel like, don't get on a dating app if you don't have $500 to fly to where the person is. Like, I almost feel like there needs to be this sense in which, like, okay, if I'm serious enough about this, like, I'm going to go meet them. And even if it's just once, like, even if it's across the country and like you just have this initial meeting and then you keep up the rest of it, on phone calls and long distance, basically. But I think the incarnational piece is really important. So I really like to encourage people to look at online dating as a tool for meeting people. Like, this is an opportunity. This is like your online coffee shop, like this is your way to meet them. But then after that, just pursue like it's a normal relationship, even if it's a long distance relationship, just pursue like it's a normal relationship. So maybe that even just that brings clarity to the person. And they're like, oh, okay, well, if I'm just treating it like a normal dating relationship, then that's a little easier. But my spirituality tends to be pretty Ignatian. And he talks a lot about taking action and then testing the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So like, obviously do your due diligence and be in a state of grace. So go to confession, go receive the Eucharist, make sure that you're in a state of grace and you can, work on an authentic prayer life where you're having real, honest conversations with Christ, who loves you he's a person, he's a real person. So have a relationship with him. But then from that posture, trying to do the Lord's will, being in a state of grace, take some steps, take some action, and then see the fruit of it. Right. And if you're moving at a reasonable pace, you can do that without any danger, right? Like, obviously when people are like dating the way the culture says to date, hooking up basically, and you've already crossed tremendous physical boundaries, like 2 or 3 dates in, okay, that's not what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just, reaching out to someone online, making a connection, asking for a phone number, talking to them on the phone, those sorts of things, you can test the fruit pretty quickly to see if it's the Lord's will or not, in the sense of, do I feel, is this moving in a positive direction? Am I, are they reciprocating? Are they feeling similar to my feelings? Do we have what it takes to keep taking the steps? So that's what I have to say about that one. What do you think?
Awesome. I agree. In the program, I'm in Dating Well. Sorry to talk about it again, but yeah,
no, please
check
do.
it out.
It's so good. I said this in our first interview. I've been waiting for something like this to exist because I get questions on a regular basis. So I'm pumped. You talk about it all you want. It's so
We're going to talk about your program also. So,
okay.
But just to say, I'm in agreement in terms of like the dating with discernment. For me is rather. I love the word incarnational. I think that's exactly the right word. That there is. God doesn't just operate in the clouds. Jesus, again, if we just put us all, is the game changer, because Jesus came and incarnated himself into our humanity, into our experience, into our world. And he does that repeatedly to each and every single one of us in a very individual way as well. And so he is guiding us and he is leading us and he does care about the things that we are experiencing. And so he does care about our dating relationships also and how we date. And he wants to guide us in that process. And so I agree with what you're saying, which is that you have to take steps out and then discern. and then reflect. And so there's a lot of process that there's risk in that, but that's the only way that you grow. You have to engage, and then you have to reflect on what you experience. And then you sift that. Like we said earlier, God uses all of these things to sift our desires, to make his will known within our own lives by speaking to what we experience within our own interior space. But we have to be able to have ears that hear and be able to know and understand how God operates and moves within our lives. And so there is engagement, and we're going to mess it up. And that's why we can't be scrupulous about this. Like, because scrupulosity prevents us from being able to fully listen or to hear God's voice appropriately. So we have to be willing to kind of take steps and mess up a little bit. Again, we're not talking about like grave sin. I'm not encouraging that, but we're saying that but even if you do grave sin and you learn from it, then you go to confession and you get yourself back in the path. I mean, that's the path that we have. And so in terms of how to know whether or not online dating is God's will for you, I love what you said, which is in terms of not making distinctions anymore, looking at it as one, but then really for yourself, look at what the fruits are in your own space. Do you find that when you create these profiles that you're growing more impatient, or that you're growing more frustrated, that you're not getting as many likes as you would want, or not getting as much interaction on it as possible? Like, test what the fruit is really in your own heart with it. And be honest with that. And that's how I feel truthfully about social media as a whole. Sometimes I'm like, what's the fruit of this in my own life? I'm not sure if it's always good. I'm not sure if it's always bad. In certain apps, I'm able to handle better than other apps. And so I discard the other apps, and stay focused on the ones that I feel like I can actually engage in and grow as a person in. And so similar when it comes to online dating, if you find that it's not helping you grow, or that you're not becoming a better version of yourself as a result of it, then let it go. Then let it go.
What came up as you were saying that was the fruits of the Spirit. So that's what I was kind of trying to grasp at, like, how do you know what the fruits are? And I couldn't think fast enough. So as you were saying, and you said patience, it's a fruit of the Spirit.
It is.
And so the fruits of the Spirit, in case anyone needs reminding, I grew up Protestant. We had a lot of fabulous songs to memorize, all sorts of things.
There you go. Well, give it to us.
I'm not going to sing it. Do you want me to sing it? I'm not going to sing it.
Sing it.
Oh my gosh.
Come on, Elizabeth. Give it to us.
The fruit of the Spirit's not an orange. The fruit of the Spirit's not an orange. If you want to be an orange, you might as well hear it. You can't be a fruit of the Spirit, because the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. No, can't believe I just did that. Now
yeah, all right.
I'm so
do I have to pay a copyright for that? I hope I don't. I
doubt it. I have no idea where it came from, but my Protestant childhood. Technically, it's all just the Bible.
It's just the Bible. There it is.
Yeah,
that was well done. Thank you for that.
Are the fruits of the Spirit present in your life as you're pursuing this dating relationship that you started online? And if not, out it goes. And if yes, then you can keep going. Take the next step. Cannot believe I just sang on your show. Oh my gosh.
You did great. That was awesome.
Ooh. If you pull a clip out of this to use for advertising, please don't let it be that one.
I can't make any promises.
I see your face.
As my kids say, I can't make any promises.
That's fine. I gave it to you. You have true freedom here. Whew. We're back to humility. Did we ever leave? Humility is so important in dating, and I just demonstrated for you.
That
be
was
authentically humble.
That's it. Just be yourself. Be yourself. That's it. And if they don't like it, then that's their problem. All right, let's go on to the next question. That was good dating advice right there, too, by the way.
Thanks.
All right.
That's actually a really good dating advice. Okay, next.
It is. Well, let's just go on that then. Let's riff on that for a second. I mean, because I know obviously you got to have your best face forward. I get it initially. You got to make sure the hair is good. You gentlemen, you're not obviously flatulating on the first date. Things like this that like you just can't.
You do say, excuse me.
Or, don't. I'd say don't. You go outside.
I can't help it.
Then,
oh my gosh.
Then don't eat Mexican on the first date.
Oh, this is a fabulous conversation.
Maybe that comes out later, obviously, but I think
awesome.
you got to have some discretion, at least I believe. But at this.
I love where this conversation's going.
Yeah, this has been great.
This is fun.
Welcome to my podcast. This is what we do.
Heyo.
So, but obviously, like, you can't completely hide yourself, and you can't be so agreeable that you say yes to everything, like that they just agree to everything that they like, or that's what the case is. So anyways, enough of that. All right. everybody. I'm just taking a quick break here from my conversation with Elizabeth Busby just to encourage you to check out Dating Well. You know, we're talking about dating, and if you've been enjoying this conversation, enjoying the answers that we're offering to you, then you're going to absolutely love Dating Well. 19 video lessons, short lessons, 7 to 17 minutes worth in length, reflection questions, some exercises just to get you thinking and reflecting about dating, how to be able to do it better. You know, I'm a marriage therapist. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I want to be able to create this resource to be able to help you better navigate the dating scene. So if you're interested, please check it out. Go to faithandmarriage.org for more information, and you can learn everything you want to know about dating well with previous episodes of this podcast. So check it out. You're going to love it. And let's get back to this conversation with Elizabeth. Last question here, and then I want to give time for you to talk about your show also. This is a question here goes, how can I be more like the Blessed Virgin Mary while I'm in a relationship? And I don't want to be disparaging. Obviously, thank you for asking this question, but I find it hard to answer this one. And I don't want to make fun of anybody because I know the person who asked this is being sincere. But I would say, I'm going to start and then you can go more with this. I guess not take it literally. Maybe that's just me. Obviously, like was a teenager and, the Lord spoke to her and she was already betrothed to Joseph and was pregnant and she has a celibate marriage, so the circumstances obviously are completely different. But in terms of how do you so how do you approach or take that idea of who she is as a perfect person and bringing that into a relationship? I don't know. I guess a part of me feels like that becomes a little bit too lofty. Maybe I'm wrong, or a little too pious of a question to be asking. Like, she wants to guide you as the Lord wants to guide you in dating relationships, but to set her as an ideal, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is where everybody stops listening to the show.
Well, you brought me on so we can compliment each other.
Yeah.
I love questions like this. Give me all the tough ones. Let me
take it.
them.
All right. I just find it too pious, but that's just me.
Well, you invited me on your show, so I'll answer it.
Give it to me.
I do think that there is a risk of piety in approaching things like this. I see these kinds of questions a lot in, like, how do I be just like Mary in modesty? How do I be just like Mary in childbirth? How do I be just like Mary in whatever? And what I think there is a risk for piety, but I also think that the real desire underneath it and the way that I approach these questions when I hear them is, we know that Mary is the ideal. Like, she never sinned. She is the model of perfect femininity. And how do I do that? Like, how do I aspire to be authentically feminine and give total glory to God in my femininity when I'm in a dating relationship? So that's how I interpret the question. I did not ask for clarity, so I have no idea where she's coming from, but that is how I interpreted the question.
But that's a very charitable way of reading. That's great. Roll with it. I like that.
All right. So what do we know about authentic femininity, right? And that's something that Mary can teach us. And I love John Paul II for this. He wrote this incredible letter to women that's so beautiful that if you haven't read it, please go read it. I think that is a really wonderful resource for you. And when I think about what Papa John Paul taught us about femininity, there's a true receptivity that comes with femininity. And you can even see in our bodies that women are more receptive than men. And, we have a space in our body that literally exists. The whole purpose of it is to hold and nurture another human being. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like our womb is what I'm talking about, our uterus. There's nothing similar in a man's body. Like, you can see in our bodies that we are meant to hold and to be receptive and to welcome in. And so I think that, when you're applying that to a relationship, okay, well, do you have this tendency to grasp and take over and emasculate? Do you have this tendency to try to always do things your way, to never give him the opportunity to, like, be himself? Do you allow yourself to really embrace authentic humility? Obviously, humility is something that men should do too. But I think Mary really embodies the beauty of humility in her feminine way versus the beauty of humility in the Lord's masculine way, right? Like, if you look at Jesus versus Mary and how they practice humility, Christ allowed himself to be crucified naked on a cross, and Mary allowed it to, like, you know, it happened and she received it and she grieved it in her heart, right? You can see the way humility is manifested in the differences. Mary also pondered things in her heart. So I think that there is this tendency in fallen, broken femininity to gossip, to speak in a very biting way, to be very cruel in the way you speak. And Mary shows us that one of the things that's necessary in femininity is to wait a second, you know, to take what has happened and to pray through it and to hold it in your heart and to, you know, really allow the Lord to influence what happened before you, you know, go out and use a sharp tongue. Mary was also so selfless in her gift. Like, she found out about Christ incarnate in her womb. And in the same conversation, she found out about her older cousin pregnant with a miracle baby. And she left relatively quickly after, you know, even though she was likely in her first trimester. We can argue whether or not she had morning sickness. I happen to think morning sickness is a result of the fall, so I don't think she had it, but we could argue. Either way, there's some fatigue, right? Being first trimester pregnant on a donkey for however many miles it is to see Elizabeth, and then to go serve her through her last month of pregnancy, which, if you've ever seen a pregnant woman in their last months of pregnancy, there are a lot of things you can do to help them. Their bodies are very occupied with their gestating. So she went and in her first trimester of pregnancy served her cousin, right? So how can you serve? How can you be quick to offer your gift of service to other people? And how can you not take, but give? So those are the first few things I'm thinking about. But really overarchingly, if you're asking this kind of question and you're taking my approach of, I know she's the authentic woman, and how do I be more authentically feminine? I think studying Letter to Women is a great place to start. He also has a really beautiful letter on the rosary. Is it a letter or is it an encyclical? I can't remember. And you can't either. We don't know. You guys Google it. That's why I have the internet. So find his writing on the rosary and read that too. And just see, you know, what are the qualities we know about Mary and how do you embody those particular virtues in your relationship? And, but even not just in that your dating relationship, like just do it in general, and then it will flow naturally in your relationship. So that's what I have to say.
I think that's a great response. I think it's great. The only thing I would add is in terms of like authentic femininity and how to be like the Blessed Virgin Mary, if that's what we're looking at as kind of like an archetype, you know, of what femininity is and how to imbibe that and live that within your own kind of day-to-day experience, is just being cautious to not always be dating projects and to be dating guys who are actually equals to you.
Look at that. That is very good advice.
Yeah, because you don't have to be motherly to every guy that you date. You know, it doesn't always. You don't have to have the baby bird syndrome or whatever it is, the broken bird syndrome. What's, you know? My
gosh, that is an incredibly rich thing to say. Mm-hmm. We could unpack that in a whole episode. Maybe we will one day. We will. Y'all take that advice. That's good advice. Process that. Pray about that.
Yeah, because I think that's a manifestation of fallen femininity. Is this need to overly protect and overly mother. Or then to think that, you know, the only guys you're worthy of dating are guys that you have to kind of fix up, you know, and rather than finding guys who are evenly yoked to you and genuinely, you know, that there's a real partnership that's supposed to happen in marriage. And so not always looking at guys that you're interested in as guys who are, you know, fixer-uppers. So that's the only piece that I would say. But I could see that you're
love that.
The wheels are churning in your head. So why don't you just throw out some thoughts?
I just think that's really wise advice. That caught me really off guard. I hadn't thought about it that way, but oh man, how often that happens. And I'm thinking too about the general emasculation of men in the culture. And so how many men are used to being not men, and how women who are not embodying authentic femininity can then also rob men of the opportunity to be more authentically masculine, and how much that can happen in a relationship. I love where the Spirit took that question. And it's caught me so off guard. It was so not what I was thinking at all, that it totally feels like it was something that was meant to be said for someone who's listening. So if it's you that needed to hear that, please, in all humility, receive what Dr. Mario just had to say and take that to prayer, because that is powerful.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when we look at these questions, and this is why I try not to be overly pious in my faith. I mean, I believe obviously that the question here is obviously sincere, but not wanting then to be like, well, you know, then I just to be the best mother. You know, sometimes we can just project these things out, and we put so much pressure on ourselves. It's like, just like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. And so like looking at, obviously she wants to guide you, looking at that as a model for sure, as you said, like in terms of a model of femininity, and then really saying, okay, well, what does that mean? And how do I really live out my femininity in a dating relationship? And then, then that's what that means. So lots of thoughts there. All right. Last question. I said that was the last one, but we got one more here, and then we'll tackle this. So put your marriage therapist hat on here, Elizabeth.
That's why I put this question in. We had a bunch of questions and I picked this one because it's so fun to talk with other therapists about therapy type things. Yeah. So that's why I popped it in.
This is great. So how to communicate with one another when communication styles are different.
I love talking about this sort of thing. So the first thing that I want to say is just because your communication style is your communication style doesn't mean it is the right communication style. Right. I think that in so many of these instances, we come as we approach situations. Maybe I'm just talking about myself. Let's just talk about myself here. I approach situations thinking that my way is the right way. My God bless my husband. I am so hard to be married to, you guys. He is so beautiful and holy and being made holier every day by choosing to stay married to me. Uphold his vows. He's so great. So anyway, I come and I approach things as though my way is the right way. And when he does things differently, I'm like, no, you have to do it my way because my way is the right way. Right. And I think that it takes a lot of humility. Every relationship does. And I think this is one of the ways that marriage sanctifies you. It makes you holy because it refines these things in you that are so pride-based. But just because your partner communicates in a different way doesn't mean your way is right and their way is wrong. And I think that is one thing to start with understanding is like, unless there's abuse in a situation, obviously the abuse is wrong. But in a lot of situations, there isn't abuse. There's just different styles. And I think that it's important to know that just because their style is different doesn't mean it's wrong. So that is number one. Just make sure that you recognize that your styles, the question wasn't worded as though they thought that they were right and the person was wrong, but it's
no, but that's one way. Yeah.
Yep. So I would also, I think, I learned a lot from the book by Dr. Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages. And I extrapolate that advice to a lot of different things when I'm working with my couples, when I'm in my own relationship, when I'm talking to my children and teaching them things. And one of the things he says in that book, The 5 Love Languages, is basically if you speak a different language than your spouse or your spouse speaks a different language than you, learn to communicate in their language. And that's one of these things about communication styles also. I think it's important to learn to communicate in their style too. It doesn't mean yours has to completely go away, but if both of you are working to learn the other person's style, then you're going to have a much more productive, collaborative relationship. I think there are some instances where you can't do that. And the person, okay, so here's the example that I'm thinking about. So I am an incredibly slow processor. I think it's very inconsistent with everything else about my personality because I move through the world at a really fast pace. So it took me a really long time to acknowledge that I'm a slow processor. Like I will say something in the moment and I'll give you an answer, but in reality, I'm going to take in what you said. I'm going to chew on it for 5 days. And then I'll know how I really feel about it. And I want to come back and tell you how I really feel. So my husband and I had a really hard time.
We can re-record this podcast in a couple of days.
In 5 days.
In 5 days, if you need to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
We had the questions in advance, so that was a little helpful. But yeah, it's true. It's a really vulnerable piece of my personality. And I thank the Lord on a regular basis for it because it humbles me and it is important to recognize in myself. And it's been incredibly enlightening and helpful in every single relationship that I have to know that about myself. So in really, really serious conversations and when really serious issues are brought up, my husband is a fast processor. He is very sharp. He is very quick-witted. His brain moves he's an engineer. His brain moves very fast, very analytically. So he knows how he feels in a moment and he does not change his mind. And he can tell you how he feels in a moment. And it's really impressive. And so if a big thing is coming up, or there's a big thing we need to talk about, or some huge decision that needs to be made, as long as it's not an imminent decision, and most of them aren't, we'll talk about it and then we'll reconvene in 3 or 4 days once I know how I feel. That is not something that I can't learn to move faster. That's not something that I can't I can't adapt to his style in that way. He has had to adapt to mine. But there are, of course, other types of communication styles and different ways of communicating and conflict resolution and whatever that I can compromise on. So I think part of it is just there are certain things that you just are going to have to die to yourself and do it your partner's way. Otherwise you're going to be gridlocked on everything. But then there are other ways where you can die to yourself and choose to learn their way. And even though you would rather do it your way, you can do it his way. I'm being very vague, so maybe it would be helpful if you gave some examples.
No. I think you're right on it. You're right on it in terms of just, so the question obviously is in the context of dating. in trying to understand each other's styles. So certainly the posture has to be, as you said, learning how to listen and understand what your boyfriend or girlfriend's communication style is. And also understanding what your style is. Back to this question of discernment that we've been saying, you have to engage and then you have to process afterwards. Sometimes you don't even know what your communication style is until you've been in a few relationships. You're like, oh, this is the way I talk about my feelings, or this is the way I talk about what I want. I don't even know how to talk about what I want. And now I'm learning how to do this. And so you don't even know what your own communication style is. And it's getting pulled out of you in the context of a relationship as you're learning. And so again, back to this question of this is discernment, then you start trying to learn and understand what their style is. And if you feel that you're able to, like you said, make enough movement that you can get on the same page with them, and you feel that that is being reciprocated also, then great. Those are good thumbs up. That's what we want to see in a relationship. If you find that even despite your best efforts, that the styles are not meshing and that you always feel like it's a forced conversation, or you can't resolve conflict, or you can't get past it, or you can't see eye to eye, or you're so completely different both in your personalities and in your interests and in your communication styles of those personality interests, and it just isn't fitting, then you got to let that relationship go. Because then that means that it just isn't meant to be. And so, yes, you want to know how to communicate. You want to know how to be able to listen. You want to know how to be able to meet your boyfriend or your girlfriend and understand what their styles are. But there's also a limit to that. And again, this is why we're talking about discernment, that if you find that you've hit that limit, you've done what you can, and it's been months and the two of you are still just kind of getting at each other and you can't get past that, then that's a sign to say that it might be time to let this thing go. Because if you're already having that many issues in that inability to communicate, an inability to understand each other's styles or respect it, or, it really mesh in that while you're dating, then, it ain't going to change when you get married. It's not going to get any better. And so might as well just begin to call it then.
That's really great advice.
Yeah. The last thing I would say is this, so we talked about styles. There's lots of different styles to talk about also. So you referred to, Chapman's work, of course, at the 5 love languages, looking at the different ways that we communicate and receive love. I'll pull another kind of theorist out here for the purposes of the conversation. Sue Johnson and her work with attachment theory in relationships, and her book, Hold Me Tight, which is just the best book with regards to marriage counseling. And when she speaks about styles, she says that those styles really come out of kind of our attachment patterns. And that often what happens in relationships is that somebody is a pursuer, is an initiator, and somebody is a withdrawer. And so when someone's initiating conversation, there tends to be one person who tends to be the one who brings up the issues in the relationship. That's not always the case. You can have a relationship style where you have two pursuers who are butting heads often, or you can have a relationship style where you have two withdrawers who are just ignoring all the problems and ignoring all the issues in the relationship. And so we want to be able to find a nice balance between initiating and responding. Now, if you get into this dance, that she uses this word, she doesn't say patterns, but she uses the word dance, because that's what ends up happening. We fall into these kind of dances with one another that we just already know where the other's going to go. That if somebody is a pursuer and one is a withdrawer, then the withdrawer just wants to withdraw and the pursuer wants to continue to pursue. And so that becomes a style that can lead towards conflict, because you feel like you're the one that's always bringing things up. He's never being reciprocated, and he's never saying things. He's never bringing it back. And you just want to be able to say, okay, well, how do we solve this? Well, that means the pursuer has to back off a little bit to give room for the withdrawer to engage. Because at the end, what we want is both people to be engaged in the relationship. And so again, knowing each other's tendencies, like how do you tend to handle conflict? Are you the one that wants to kind of get the problem solved right away? Or are you the one that's going to kind of, just kind of back off and, sweep it under the rug? And maybe at some point, if we just kind of avoid it enough, then it'll kind of take care of itself. Again, two extremes that neither of which are helpful or virtuous. Virtue is always found in the middle, where we want to find prudence and patience and courage to be able to initiate discussions that need to be initiated, but then also patience and temperance to let go when we need to.
Perfect. Love it.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I'm great.
All right. Praise the Lord. All right, Elizabeth. Well, this has been great. Thanks so much for we just tackled those 4 questions. That was great. All right. So shifting gears here with the time that we have, tell the audience a little bit about Next Step. Talk about the work that you've done with this program in terms of discerning marriage and how to really help couples that are seriously dating kind of enter into this, what do you call it? Like a pre-engagement phase, and being able to navigate, okay, well, we're seriously dating, but we're not quite engaged yet. How do we navigate that phase where we know it's kind of on the horizon? What are the things we need to be kind of addressing and aware of? So tell me more about Next Step.
All right. So Next Step, the idea came to me in part from my own experience and in part from my academic study. So I, at the time that I was working on my first master's in theology, I was going through a really awful breakup, and the things that ended up being the end of the, like what ended up like being the writing on the wall that the relationship needed to end and it wasn't going to work long-term, were things that we absolutely could have seen in advance had we had someone wise to guide us, or we had some sort of like intentional structure that we could follow through. And it eventually, this particular topic came out in a book that we were reading that was to help. It was called 101 Questions to Ask Before You Get Engaged, which was really awesome. It was a great resource, but it wasn't quite thorough enough, and it didn't really help facilitate the conversations we needed. So I was processing, like, feeling not abandoned by the church. That's a little bit dramatic. I mean, I was feeling that because I was a very dramatic person, but I don't think that was fair. But I do think that I recognize this void that could have been helpful of, like, okay, when we were seriously dating, like we weren't engaged by the time we broke up, but we were seriously dating and we were contemplating engagement, like there's a need for someone to accompany you in that stage. Okay. So when I was doing my thesis, then my academic work on TOB and discerning marriage, I discovered this writing by John Paul II called Familiaris Consortio. It's an apostolic exhortation he wrote in the late 70s after a synod of bishops. And it's a beautiful document. It is so good. I highly recommend you reading it. But he, in Article 66, he talks about the 3 different stages of marriage preparation. So remote is the first one, and it takes place in the home when a child is growing up and learning about marriage kind of with some vicarious knowledge. Also, I mean, they're explicitly taught about marriage, but they also are in the school of love where they're learning things. The second is proximate preparation, and it takes place at a suitable age and with adequate catechesis is what the Pope's language, but it covers like 15 different things that a person should learn in this stage about marriage, and then and the tools necessary to be married well. And then he talks about immediate preparation. So remote, proximate, and immediate. And immediate preparation, the language he uses is the months and weeks immediately preceding the wedding. And then he talks about some more in-depth things that should be covered there that are much more intimate and much more specific to the couple, the liturgical mass, their conjugal relationship, those sorts of things. And I remember reading that and thinking, okay, all of the things that he's listing in proximate preparation are what we cover in marriage prep. And immediate preparation is engagement in the West, at least, the months and weeks immediately preceding the wedding, that we call that engagement. And the proximate preparation things are what's included in immediate preparation. So, but that's not his design. That's not what he thought should happen. So then I started doing a ton of research on like who's implementing proximate preparation, right? Like who has distinguished the knowledge gaining stage from the we're getting married soon stage. And the short answer was nobody. Like there were a number of people who like recognize, a small number of people who recognize that it should be distinct, but there was no one who was actually dividing them. And basically the Lord was like, I want you to do this. And I was like, no. So that's when I went and got my counseling degree. Cause I was like, I can just work with individual couples who are seriously dating and I can work with them. And I created this protocol for pre-engagement that I use for my couples who come to me when they're dating.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. And it's been really great and beautiful. But by the time I graduated with that degree, all those years later, still no one was doing proximate prep in the church. And God was like, please just do this. So I said, okay, but you have to help me. Anyway, so the Lord and I collaborated on this project, and that became Next Step. I called it Next Step because I wanted it to be this just casual, like this is just the next step in your relationship when you're thinking about getting married. This is just the next thing you do, right? It doesn't mean you're going to get engaged at the end of it. In fact, I get very, very, very proud of my couples who go through it and break up in the middle of it, because I'd so much rather you break up than get married and be miserable or pursue divorce or whatever. So it really is to help you have a successful discernment, whether the answer is yes or no. In the person you're dating. And really it just follows the things in Familiaris Consortio Article 66. So I took the liberty of making a like structure that I thought people would come to. Like 8 weeks seemed comfortable. So there's 8 sessions. I was like, someone will give me 2 months, 9, 10, 11. The partner who doesn't want to come, like the boyfriend or the girlfriend who doesn't want to come, is probably not going to sign up for that, but there is no way I can do this in like 4 or 5 weeks. So I did 8. And then I just divide all the content in Next Step is based on what John Paul II should be covered in Familiaris Consortio. I didn't get to cover all of it because again, I was working within what I thought people would be open to coming to. But I covered the vast majority of it. And so the structure of the program is that you meet with a mentor couple, because again, I'm very Ignatian in my spirituality. And he talks about accompaniment being really important in discernment. And he's, I think, talking primarily to people who are discerning religious life. So you have internal formators and external formators and confessors and spiritual directors and all of these awesome people. And married couples get like nobody. Sometimes if they're really lucky, they get assigned like a sponsor couple, but not even everybody. There's not that kind of standardization across dioceses. And so I wanted people to get a mentor couple so that they could sit at the feet of these mentors and be accompanied through this program. And then they would also have someone with a healthy, successful marriage to look up to, because I also am very aware of the statistics that a lot of people don't have those. Even if their parents stayed married, they maybe aren't happy about it, or they're maybe not thriving, or, whatever. So I'm aware that people don't have that example. So Next Step has that twofold benefit of going through the proximate preparation stage that John Paul II envisioned, and then being accompanied by a mentor. So the structure of the program right now, it's been running for about 4 years in my home diocese, back in DFW. And we have had hundreds of people go through this program, which is like, thank you, Lord, for that. And so the structure right now is it's only available live, or you could do it virtually, but live. So,
it's a cohort model.
Yes. So you either go through it in person if you're local, or you can do it online. But then you're put in a mentor group and you're listening to the live talks, and you're with your mentor group, and you do the 8 weeks. So each session is 2 hours, an hour of content and an hour of study group, an hour of content and an hour of your small group. With your mentor couple, you're put in a group with peers, so other couples. And that's great. But then the Lord granted this incredible heart's desire of working for the Theology of the Body Institute, and they have picked up Next Step. So we have filmed videos, and it's in post-production right now. So by the time it's a little bit hasty to be like pitching Next Step, because it's not done yet, but it will be done.
It will be
in the next few months. And I can just link back to this episode. And they can do dating while they're waiting. So perfect. We do have something to offer them. But anyway, so it will be offered both in the cohort format. So a parish or a diocese can have this. They can either welcome a group of people together, push play on my videos and use those. I also have the talks available. My ideal is that a local speaker would give them. So you can, have speakers that are trained to give the talks in person, but the talks are the ones that I give, because it's very important to me to be faithful to the magisterium when you're talking about really important stuff like this. So I give you the talk, but you can deliver it. Or if you're not in a place where Next Step's offered, or if you're on a time crunch, or one of you is in France and the other one is in the US and the time zone just won't work, you can do the model that Dating Well is, which is asynchronous, and you can just log on and you can take the class, just the two of you. And I'm hoping that we can work out some sort of virtual mentor model where you get like 2 to 4 sessions one-on-one with someone, but that is a pipe dream. We'll see what the Lord does with that. Because the accompaniment piece is so important. So that's Next Step. Like I said, it's only available right now virtually. I feel like I'm teasing these people, and I'm really sorry about that, but
you're fine.
I'm following the invitations the Lord is giving me to talk about my dreams. So it is running at St. Thomas Aquinas in Dallas. And so you can, by the time this drops, the session for the fall is already going. So by the time this drops, it would be the spring session. But you're welcome to email me, Elizabeth@tobinstitute.org. I probably shouldn't have just given my email out, but be responsible with it, people.
We'll have a link to it in the show notes for sure.
Be responsible with it, y'all. Yeah, it's fine. So you can email me, and then I'll get you hooked up with the live cohort, or you can get on our mailing list to find out when Next Step will be available for you. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. I am so grateful that the Lord has allowed this dream of mine to come to fruition. I'm really excited for the next year and what the Lord's going to do with Next Step. We've had incredible feedback so far. We've had a lot of couples get married. We've had a lot of couples break up. We've had couples break up and go through Next Step with their new person. We've had it all. It's just been so beautiful to watch this unfold. So I know that you experienced something very similar, and I'm assuming you've experienced something similar in Dating Well, and like throwing this out in the universe and seeing that the Lord is blessing it tremendously. And there's something so beautiful in getting to co-create. It really, Ross and I see it very much as a spiritual fruitfulness of our marriage. And so this is very much something that has come from, our own spiritual lives and our marriage and those sorts of things as far as the effort goes, it's put into it in the prayer and all that. So I'm sure you have a similar posture with your lovely bride of like, this is just a really beautiful spiritual fruit of your love. And I'm just so excited to see it flourish.
Amen. So. Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, that's it. I mean, we'll have a link to that in discerningmarriage.com. Is that right?
Yep. That's
it. People can sign up for it. We'll have a link to that as well.
Sign up.
No, but I think what you're saying is really great in terms of like, we don't have to wait until we're engaged to begin some of these conversations. And some of that, there's an overlap here between our programs because I'm certainly encouraging couples, to begin thinking about these things as well and having that. But I think what you're saying is the value that you're offering here is that you're also with other couples who are in that stage. And you're able to have these conversations with other people, because sometimes even like when we do our marriage retreats, the value that we have with our marriage retreats at Faith in Marriage is that presenting couples share their stories. And like this past weekend, I did a retreat, and some of the feedback we received was just as simple as like, I didn't feel weird. Like I thought I was like the only one who like dealt with these things or had these issues or thought these things. But when you're in an environment with other people who are sharing their stories, then it gives permission to be able to say, no, like it's okay. It's okay. Or it gives you permission to say, well, maybe I am what I am thinking is, or what I am experiencing maybe is a little bit off. This isn't normal because of maybe we grew up in a lot of dysfunction that our kind of our compass for normal or whatever we define normal is maybe a little bit off. And so we need to be aware of that also, as we kind of grow. Again, that's what the whole process is, to help us to grow. Now, briefly, just, you talk about the 8 lessons, and we really wanted to center it on John Paul II's thoughts, specifically there in Familiaris Consortio, which is also on my shelf. Sorry, listeners. So, but just to say, I had to do it just to be funny. But like, if you can nail like one high point, like what really do you feel like is the key to be able to take the relationship to the next step?
Ooh, you mean how a person decides what to do next? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I'm sure you cover that in your program. So like what do you, I'm sure you extrapolate that over the 8 weeks, but like what really should people be looking for? And
yeah. I think we're going to come full circle and talk about the fruits of the Spirit. So in discernment, so many times, the vast majority of the times, God is not going to like come out of the sky and tell you what to do. He's not just going to be like, Mary, I want you to conceive this baby. Will you say yes to me? Like that was a special grace that Mary was
special
given.
Grace. That's right.
Most of the time, the Lord is going to allow you to choose. And I think that's something that people have a really hard time with. They have a really hard time with the responsibility of choosing. And what Next Step allows you to do is, before you have the pressure of engagement, when, let's be honest, most engaged couples are planning a wedding. And so you have save the dates and you've put money down on deposits, and like the stakes are really high if you want to postpone or call it off. It's expensive. It can be humiliating. Like there's social pressure. I mean, the stakes are really high when you're engaged. So,
I want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I know I asked you a question. Now I'm interrupting you, which is totally rude, but I'm going to do it.
Worries.
Sorry. But like, because I do talk about this in the program also, that like, I think engagement, like I think the sermon's over. Truthfully, like I think the sermon should be over by the time you get to engage. Like obviously you keep it open-ended, just because you're not fully married yet. But I joke about this in the program, and it's a proposal is a yes or no question. I mean, it's a closed-ended question, and you don't even ask that question until you already know what the answer is. And so I do believe that there's a lot that needs to happen even before then. And then because to your point, like you're just so busy planning, and all those things just take time, that you may get out of the discernment piece because you're just busy you're busy in the preparation piece. Back to kind of religious life, like you talked about with a seminarian, when a guy, it gives before in third theology, typically the beginning of third theology, the man writes a letter to his bishop, and it's called a petition to call to orders. And so it's a formal letter that he writes to saying, I'm ready. I want to be called into the diaconate. And then the bishop responds. And usually it's a formal process, and the bishop says yes. And at that point, then, listen, everybody's already checked it off the list. Formators say this is good to go. The bishop is saying this is good to go. You're saying this is good to go. So now we're in the preparation for diaconate. And then it's similar when it comes to the fourth year. We're doing the same process. And if the internship goes well, your diaconate ministry goes well, then you're ready for priesthood and there's no hiccups, then we do the same thing. But like, there's a point here where you shouldn't still be wondering if you're called to be a priest when you're already a deacon. I mean, I know that happens, and I know men who certainly discern out because different reasons, pressures, circumstances could have played into that. But by and large, again, the norm, not saying this is everybody, but by and large, the sermon is over. Like you know the answer to the question, and you're just waiting for the time to happen. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're okay. Yes, I totally think that in practice, that's how it goes. Like that's what people are set and they're ready to say yes. I think there's even like in the church, there can be this formal rite of betrothal when you're engaged, where you are basically saying like, I'm going to say yes to you in however many weeks. But I do think that it's an important distinction, and you can walk away. You are free to leave because 100%. You have not taken your vows.
100%.
So if something comes
100%.
up, you have to be able to walk away. Whereas if something comes up after you get married, you've made your vows already. It's very different. So there is that difference. But the weight, and also just the practical lived experience of people, which is what you're saying of like, most people are done. They're not actually doing the work of discernment. And yet that's when the church gives you all this information about what it means to be married and gives you questions. Like there's this huge, like when you actually tease out what's going on here, like what happens with an engaged couple's posture and what the church has to offer engaged couples, like there's a disconnect. There just truly is. And I can appreciate that when someone's engaged and they're wanting to get married, we can like ask something of them, quote unquote, by doing the marriage prep stuff. And I'm glad, it's better than nothing, but it's really late. And I would honestly say it's too late. I mean, echoing what you're saying, like people aren't in the posture of discerning anymore. You are when you're seriously dating. And I've named that stage pre-engagement because everybody goes through it. Like you can look at the culture. That's when people are moving in together. Why do you move in together? The vast majority of people, it's because you want to know if this is going to work out. Great intention, bad execution. However, the intention we all have and the proper execution is just formal discernment. And our Papa, John Paul II, knew that, right? That's how he delineated it. So I think that if you're willing to do the work in pre-engagement, where, when you're seriously dating and you're thinking, I want to marry this person, and you're wanting to deep dive in, that is when you can really see the fruits of the Spirit at play. And the questions that we give you, we give you also homework questions. The topics we cover, we do not hold back. You probably got that out of me, just your limited exposure to me as a person. Like you have a right as a baptized Christian to know this stuff that the church teaches, and I am going to give it to you. And some of it's really hard. It's like every hot button issue in the entire political sphere today. But you know what? Like,
needs to be talked about.
The Lord is, he gives me our strength. And so we talk about it, and then we give you questions to process, and you have time with the mentor couples and your peers to process. And you can test the fruits of the Spirit. Like, and it will be obvious as you're having these discussions, like, do I want to marry this person? Is this person even capable of marriage right now? Like we get into all of this stuff of like, are you capable of what it takes to contract marriage right now, validly, illicitly? Do I want to with you after all of this, but really it's like, it gives you the opportunity to deep dive into this stuff, deep dive into the other person's heart, deep dive into what it means to get married, deep dive into the yes you're anticipating saying, and then allowing the fruits of the Spirit to play out, and you can test and see.
Amen.
What happens.
Amen. That's it. Wonderful. That was great. Thanks, Elizabeth, for sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
And you're absolutely right. It has to be, we have to engage. And I love the way you phrased it from the beginning, which you said that people are afraid of the burden of responsibility. And I think you're right. I think we're not encouraged to make choices. We're not equipped to make choices anymore. We don't know how to do that in a healthy way. And you're absolutely right. And so we have to make decisions. We have to take responsibility for our choices. And we have to learn. That's why the Lord doesn't, like, we're not algorithms. I mean, we're not just like some program, like pre-programmed bot, that's just operating in space in some pre-programmed, binary code that's there. It's not just zeros and ones. Like there's freedom. There's complete freedom that we have to be able to engage and play in the world that God's given to us. And so we choose, and we get to co-create. And if you never,
God for that.
Amen. If you would have never put the program together, then God still would love you. I mean, like that's what it is.
That's true.
But you decided to cooperate with that, and you co-created this, and there it is. And now it's blessing people. So thank you for your yes and doing it. And this has been awesome. So Elizabeth, this has been a wonderful time chatting. I look forward to future collaborations like this. I think this has been a lot of fun. So any ways that we can collaborate, future endeavors, I'm all for it.
Excellent. It's happening. You'll
Praise
see
the
us
Lord.
together again, I'm sure.
Sounds
you guys.
great. Sounds great.
This was so fun.
Yes. So final question I ask all my first-time guests. Elizabeth, what gives you hope?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, it is seeing the way that Christ has defeated suffering and death, both in general, like he literally defeated death on the cross through his intense suffering, but also getting to see it in other people. Like the verse in Romans, I think, suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. It's only once we suffer and we allow ourselves to suffer with the Lord and be transformed and have the perseverance to continue working through saying yes to the Lord in hard times. The character that comes out of that, the way that we're changed by suffering, when we suffer with the Lord, we're changed more and more into his likeness. That gives us hope that God is real, that heaven is real. So people who suffer well, people who have the courage to suffer with the Lord. John Paul II being a fabulous example. His entire family was wiped out before he was 19 years old, and then his country, and then his freedom, and then his name when he became JP2. And he, suffered the loss, but the beauty of the resurrection in each of those losses. And so people who suffer well.
Give you hope. That's beautiful. Wow. Great answer. That was awesome.
You caught me so off guard. I was not prepared to go there in my heart, but I did. So
well, you did a great job.
You wanted that.
I did want it. That was great. And you don't have to wait 5 days. Your answer you gave right now was perfect. So that was it. We're good. We got it recorded. Well, Elizabeth Busby, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Blessings to you and all the good work that you're doing.
Oh, you too. Thank you for your yes. Please thank your wife for me for supporting you in your yes. Thanks be to God.
Amen. All right. All right, everybody. Well, that does it for our conversation this episode today. If you enjoyed Elizabeth's answers and you want to learn more about the good work that she's doing, check out her podcast on YouTube, Discerning Marriage. You can see our conversation that we had prior to recording this episode on Always Hope if you want to hear the questions that we tackled on that side. So please check out the good work that she's doing. And I just want to say that if you're in this scene and you're dating and you're struggling a little bit, and again, you have found the right place. We want to continue to help, offer some clear advice that hopefully is able to give you some guidance and things, at least things to reflect upon. Even if you don't agree with everything we say, that is okay. Please just take these answers to heart and to reflect, and hopefully that they'll help you in some form or fashion. So many blessings to you, dear listener. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. Always grateful that I have people listening on the other side of this microphone. So be good, everybody. God bless. Have a great day.